Okay, so huge stack of books on Buddhism and mindfulness here.
Looks like you are really on a quest for some inner peace.
Yeah.
So let's break down these practices, try to find those aha moments,
Okay.
and give you some practical tools to use.
Said everyday life.
Yeah.
We'll explore the benefits for sure, but also those common traps.
Right.
Because mindfulness is a journey, not a quick fix.
It is. It's a journey, and it's got some fascinating terrain for sure.
Yes.
These practices offer a really unique perspective, I think, on how our minds work.
I love that. Yeah, and you've got a good mix here.
Yeah.
Classic Buddhist texts, modern takes.
Even a guide to mindful eating.
Yeah.
Clearly, you want the philosophy and the practical application, so let's ditch all the modern mindfulness buzzwords, get back to the source. What is mindfulness, really? It's more than just meditation. Right?
You're right, it is much broader than that. Mindfulness, in the Buddhist sense, is about cultivating a very particular type of awareness.
Okay.
One that's present, doesn't judge, and offers real insight.
I like it.
It's about seeing the reality of our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations.
Without getting swept away by them.
Without getting totally consumed.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But these books mention something called fabricated mindfulness.
Versus, like, a more natural kind. What's that all about?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that distinction comes from the Dzogchen tradition.
Okay.
They talk about fabricated mindfulness, which is similar to what some Buddhist texts call prompted consciousness. And essentially it means we're making a deliberate effort to be mindful. We're using our intention, our effort, to cultivate awareness. Think of it like using a magnifying glass
Okay.
to focus your attention.
Mindfulness boot camp.
Exactly. Exactly. That's crucial when you're starting out.
Right.
But the goal is to develop unprompted mindfulness.
Where it becomes more spontaneous, more like a habit.
Got it.
You're not struggling to be present. It's just happening. One text uses this analogy of mindfulness as watchman.
Okay, I like that visual.
It's vivid.
Right.
The watchman is always alert, observing what's happening.
But not getting involved in the drama.
Right.
That's the kind of awareness we're cultivating in mindfulness.
Not getting caught up in every thought spiral that passes by.
Exactly.
So how does mindfulness actually change our brains?
These books mention neural networks rewiring themselves.
What's the science behind it?
Yeah, neuroscience is discovering that mindfulness does, in fact, change the structure and function of our brains.
Wow.
For example, studies show that it can increase gray matter in certain regions.
Gray matter, that's the good stuff.
It is. It's where processing and decision-making happen.
Yay.
And mindfulness also strengthens the connections between the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for self-awareness and emotional regulation,
Okay.
and the amygdala, which is our brain's fear center.
Oh, so less hijacked by the fear monster.
Precisely.
I like it.
There's even research suggesting very recently that mindfulness changes how our brains process information in real time.
What?
They call them mental photo bursts.
Mental photo bursts.
Imagine your brain constantly creating snapshots of your experience
Right.
based on your past and your expectations.
I can see.
These snapshots can sometimes overshadow your actual present moment experience.
It's interesting.
Mindfulness disrupts these automatic photo bursts,
Wow.
allowing you to experience things with more freshness.
That's mind-blowing. More presence, less autopilot.
Exactly.
These books mention the 4 foundations of mindfulness. What are they?
The 4 foundations, yeah. They're the core practices outlined in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta.
Okay.
That's a foundational text on mindfulness.
Right.
They are mindfulness of the body,
Mindfulness of feelings or sensations.
mindfulness of the mind itself.
Mindfulness of the mind itself. That sounds trippy.
Like who's watching the watcher?
It does, right? It sounds more complex than it is, actually. It's about becoming aware of the different qualities of your mind.
Okay.
Is it restless, peaceful, focused, distracted? This awareness is crucial for understanding how our minds work, and it influences how we experience the world around us. Think of it like this. If your mind is constantly filtering everything through a lens of fear or anxiety, your reality is going to look very different than if your mind is more open and compassionate.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So we've got our 4 foundations, but these seem like more than just basic definitions.
It seems like most mindfulness courses just scratch the surface.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There are deeper layers to each foundation.
And this deep dive is about uncovering those hidden depths.
Perfect. So let's start with something I think pretty universally relatable, the breath.
Sure.
Why is it such a central practice?
Yeah, the breath is like a bridge. It connects our body and mind.
Okay.
It's a constant anchor we can always return to.
Yeah. Plus, there's the historical connection. Buddha attained enlightenment while meditating on the breath.
Talk about historical significance. One of these books mentions a technique.
From the original teachings about experiencing the whole body with the breath.
That sounds, a bit vague. What does it even mean?
It's both simple and profound.
One interpretation is literal. Feeling the breath throughout your entire body as if every cell is breathing, expanding your awareness beyond just the nostrils or the chest.
Okay, I can picture that.
It's like bringing your awareness to every nook and cranny.
But what's the other interpretation?
It relates to the breath body.
The breath body.
Experiencing the breath in its entirety, the beginning, middle, and end,
Okay.
as a complete and ever-changing process.
So not just whether it's long or short, but the entire journey of each inhale and exhale.
Exactly.
How does paying attention to that help?
By paying attention to those subtle sensations, we understand the impermanent, ever-changing nature of everything.
Which is, of course, a central concept in Buddhism.
Okay.
If we can notice the subtle changes in each breath, it becomes easier to see that same impermanence in our thoughts and our emotions, even in the events of our lives.
Impermanence. Check. Where does the body scan fit into this? That seems to be the mindfulness technique these days.
Oh, yeah. The body scan is a fantastic way to cultivate this whole body awareness.
It's like a guided tour of your own physical experience.
Right.
You systematically bring your attention to different body parts, just noticing any sensations present.
Right. From the toes to the top of the head.
Or however you prefer to do it.
Exactly.
But one thing I always find interesting about the body scan is this idea of leaning into discomfort.
Yes.
That seems a bit counterintuitive. Don't we usually try to avoid discomfort?
It does go against our usual programming.
It does.
But that's where the real learning happens.
Interesting.
Instead of resisting unpleasant sensations, we acknowledge them.
Okay.
We allow them to be there without judgment.
Okay.
And what often happens is when we stop fighting those sensations, they start to lose their grip on us.
So it's more about changing our relationship to discomfort.
Rather than making it disappear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm also seeing a lot of emphasis on feeling tone in these books.
It's one of the original 4 foundations of mindfulness, right?
It is. And it's often overlooked, which is a shame because it offers incredible insight.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So feeling tone. Break it down. What are we talking about here?
In the simplest terms, feeling tone is about recognizing whether an experience is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's about tuning into the basic quality of our experience.
In each moment.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward.
But how do we start to notice these feeling tones? They seem pretty subtle.
It can be, and that's why we practice.
A good place to start is with the body scan.
Okay.
Notice the sensations that arise as you move your attention to different areas.
Yeah.
Do they feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral?
You might be surprised by what you discover. One of these books mentions a woman named Emily who really struggled with this. She always wanted to be sure she was identifying the feeling tone correctly.
Yeah.
It's a common struggle.
It is.
You want to get mindfulness right.
Right.
Which kind of defeats the purpose.
Totally. Like, am I feeling this right? But mindfulness isn't about being, right or wrong. It's about just being present with whatever's happening.
Exactly. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply acknowledging the feeling tone.
Okay.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
Saying to yourself, it's okay not to like this.
Right.
Or it's okay to like this.
That creates space for acceptance, which can be incredibly liberating.
Yeah, it's like, we're giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel.
Without making it a big deal, So we've covered body, breath, and feeling tones. What about mindfulness of the mind itself? This is where things could get really interesting or really confusing.
It can be both.
Yeah.
Mindfulness of the mind is really about observing our thought processes.
Right.
The chatter, the planning, the worrying, the daydreaming.
All of it.
All of it. It's
Yeah.
recognizing those thoughts are just thoughts, not necessarily truths.
Easier said than done. Our thoughts can feel so real, so convincing.
They do.
They can dictate our moods, our actions, even our whole reality sometimes, it feels like.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why this foundation is so important. Mindfulness isn't about stopping thoughts altogether.
Right.
Because that's pretty much impossible.
Impossible.
It's about changing our relationship to them, creating space between ourselves and our thoughts so we're not so caught up in them.
Creating space. That sounds like a nice change from the usual mental clutter. One book describes a technique called catch and release. Is that what we're talking about here?
It is. It's a great way to visualize this process.
Okay.
Imagine your thoughts are like leaves floating down a stream.
Okay.
You notice them as they pass by.
Right.
Might even briefly acknowledge them, but then you just let them float on without getting attached.
Catch and release. It's like we're fishing for peace of mind. But, my mind feels more like a raging river than a peaceful stream sometimes.
Sure.
Are we just supposed to, sit back and watch the mental rapids?
It can definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's completely normal. The mind will wander. It's what it does.
It does.
The key is not to get discouraged. Every time you notice your mind has wandered, and you will notice if you're paying attention,
Right.
it's an opportunity to gently guide it back to the present moment.
Okay.
It's like, training a puppy. It takes patience and persistence.
I like that a lot.
So we've covered the first three foundations: body, feelings, and mind. What about mindfulness of dhammas?
Right.
That one's new to me.
It's a big one. Dhammas, in this context, refer to all categories of experience.
Okay.
The five senses, the mind itself, the objects of our perception, even the mental factors influencing our experience.
Wow, okay.
It's about going beyond our immediate experience and seeing the interconnectedness of everything.
Wow, that's a huge scope.
Yeah.
I can see why these foundations are considered foundational. But with all this talk about individual experience, I'm also seeing a lot in these books about compassion and kindness.
How do those fit into mindfulness?
That's an important question. Compassion and kindness aren't just add-ons.
Okay.
They're central to mindfulness practice.
Got it.
Mindfulness helps us see the reality of our suffering.
And that naturally leads to a desire to alleviate the suffering of others.
Right.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Right, that we're all in this together. One book makes a distinction between loving kindness, they use the Pali word metta,
Right.
and desire. We often mix those up, I think, especially in relationships.
It's a crucial distinction.
It is.
It is. Loving kindness, or metta, is about offering genuine goodwill and care to others without any expectation of something in return. It's unconditional. Desire, however, is often about wanting something from others. Their attention, validation, love, whatever it may be.
Right.
It creates clinging and attachment, which ultimately leads to suffering,
So loving kindness is more about giving.
while desire is more about taking.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Okay.
Both of these mind states can profoundly affect how we interact with others.
Right.
If we act from loving kindness, our relationships are more likely to be generous, understanding, and accepting.
Makes sense.
But if we're driven by desire, we might become possessive, jealous, or resentful.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
If we're not cultivating kindness and compassion for ourselves, it's hard to offer them to others.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
One of the books even mentions a study showing that mindfulness can actually increase activity in areas of the brain associated with empathy and compassion.
Really?
It's not just a nice idea, it's changing our brains for the better.
I'm convinced. More compassion, please. So far, we've talked about mindfulness as this internal thing. Meditation, observing thoughts and feelings.
Right.
But these books are full of examples of bringing mindfulness into everyday life.
Yes.
It's not just about sitting on a cushion, right?
Absolutely not. Mindfulness applies to almost every aspect of our lives.
Like what?
Eating, walking, having difficult conversations,
Right.
even engaging in social activism.
Mindful activism. That's interesting.
It is. One book discusses how mindfulness helps us be more aware of our impact on the world.
Okay.
For example, how our choices as consumers.
Can either contribute to or alleviate suffering.
Right.
It's about being more conscious of our interconnectedness with all beings.
It's like that ripple effect.
Yes.
Every action, no matter how small, has consequences.
Exactly.
Even eating can be a mindfulness practice.
It can.
One book has this beautiful passage about a tangerine meditation.
Oh,
A
yeah.
tangerine meditation. That sounds delicious.
It does. Tell me more.
The author, Thich, Hanh, he describes sharing a tangerine with a young man who's very busy, very distracted, talking about his important projects.
Okay.
And the man peels and eats the tangerine mindlessly without really paying attention.
Right.
And Thich Hanh stops him and says, "Eat your tangerine."
Eat your tangerine. So simple, yet so profound.
Right. It's about giving our full attention to the experience of eating. The taste, the texture, the aroma,
Yeah.
even the feeling of gratitude for having food to eat.
It's about savoring each moment.
It's a good reminder to slow down and appreciate the little things.
Because those little things are actually pretty big. We've covered a lot. the foundations of mindfulness, compassion, bringing it into everyday life.
But these books also talk about pitfalls on the path to inner peace.
Oh, yeah, there are some.
I'm guessing it's not all sunshine and roses.
It's not always easy.
Right.
Our minds excel at creating illusions.
Getting caught in unhelpful patterns.
Yeah.
One book talks about the danger of relying solely on willpower to overcome our challenges.
The willpower method.
The classic approach, right? Just try harder, be stronger, push through.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
The problem is willpower is a limited resource, like a muscle that gets tired.
Right.
Relying solely on willpower makes us fight ourselves.
Creating an internal struggle that can make things worse long term.
So what's the alternative? If not willpower, then what?
Mindfulness offers a different approach.
Okay.
Instead of fighting our thoughts and feelings, we learn to observe them,
Okay.
understand them.
Create space around them.
Okay.
Through understanding, we develop a different strength, the strength of awareness, the strength of compassion,
It's like we're learning to work with our minds.
rather than against them. I like that a lot. Another pitfall that comes up is the illusion of pleasure, or what one author calls the crutch. It seems like a lot of addictive behaviors, from scrolling social media to overeating anything taken to an extreme, are driven by this illusion.
That we're getting something good from them, you know? What are your thoughts on that? It's almost like our brains are tricking us,
Yeah.
making us think we're getting this great reward.
But it's actually just like temporary relief that makes us crave more.
That's a powerful illusion.
That is.
Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and to avoid pain.
Right.
And we can get tricked into thinking certain behaviors bring us pleasure.
When in reality, they're just a temporary escape from discomfort.
It's like that saying, pain avoided is pain prolonged.
Exactly.
Is that what they mean by the crutch?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the more we rely on those crutches, the stronger those neural pathways become.
Making it harder and harder to break free.
So it's not just about like resisting the crutch itself.
But also understanding the underlying need it's fulfilling.
Yes, that's where mindfulness comes in.
Okay.
By paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations.
We see those patterns more clearly.
Right.
We start to understand the root causes of our behaviors.
Okay.
And that empowers us to make different choices.
It's like we're becoming our own inner therapists.
Right.
Which brings me to another pitfall, the myth of the addictive personality.
This idea that some people are just, wired to be addicts,
Yeah,
that they're flawed or broken in some way.
it's a very limiting belief.
It is.
And one of these books challenges that idea directly.
Okay.
It suggests that anyone, regardless of genetics or past experiences, can overcome addictive behaviors.
Wow.
It's about recognizing we all have the capacity for change and growth.
So no more blaming our genes or our childhoods for our current struggles.
Right.
That's a hopeful message.
It is, and it's backed by research.
Okay.
Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change throughout our lives, is real.
So we're not stuck with the brains we were born with.
Yeah.
We can actually rewire them through mindful practice.
That's the amazing thing about the human brain.
Right.
It's constantly evolving, learning, and adapting.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools we have for shaping that evolution positively.
This is all very, very encouraging. We've gone pretty deep here.
We've explored the depths of mindfulness, the foundations, the benefits, the potential pitfalls.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway here? What does this all mean for someone, starting this journey to inner peace?
I think the most important thing to remember is that mindfulness is a process.
Okay.
It's not a destination.
Right.
It's not about becoming some perfect, enlightened being who never feels stressed or frustrated or stuck in unhelpful patterns.
I like that.
It's about cultivating a different way of relating to our experiences,
Okay.
a way that brings more awareness, more compassion, and ultimately more freedom,
It's like learning to ride the waves of life.
with a little more grace and a little less struggle.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been incredible.
So much to think about, so much to practice. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to that thought-provoking question you left us with.
Okay.
If our thoughts and feelings are constantly changing, like a flowing river,
Yeah.
what happens when we stop trying to grasp onto them so tightly?
It's a question that gets at the heart of mindfulness.
Right.
What if, instead of constantly striving, controlling, grasping,
What if we practice letting go? Right.
what if we allowed our experiences to flow through us
Right.
without getting swept away?
It's like shifting from being the director of our mental movie
to just being like the observer, just
Yeah.
watching the show unfold.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right.
And it's not about becoming passive or indifferent.
It's about cultivating a presence that allows us to respond to life with more wisdom and compassion,
Right.
rather than just reacting out of habit or fear.
So it's not about emptying our minds, but becoming aware of our thoughts and feelings, accepting them, and then choosing how we want to respond.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where true freedom lies.
Okay.
When we're not so identified with our thoughts and feelings, we realize we have a choice in how we relate to them.
Right.
We're not at the mercy of our mental weather.
Yep.
We're not just leaves like being blown around by the wind.
Right.
We have the power to choose our direction.
Precisely. And the more we practice mindfulness, the stronger that power of choice becomes.
I like it.
We become more skilled at navigating life's ups and downs.
With grace and with equanimity.
Like we're building a mental muscle.
Yes.
One that helps us, weather any storm.
Exactly.
This has been an incredible deep dive into mindfulness.
It has.
Thank you so much for guiding us through all these practices and insights.
It was my pleasure.
And remember, every moment is a fresh start.
Okay.
An opportunity to begin again.
That's a great reminder. To our listeners, we hope this deep dive into mindfulness has been insightful and inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.